By now, you already know the headline. Nicolas Maduro was captured by the United States. That part is no longer new. What is new, and what actually matters here, is the detailed picture now emerging of how this all happened, how long it was planned, and what the rest of the world thinks it means. Because the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that this wasn't just about removing one man from power. According to President Donald Trump and the detailed reporting from BBC Verify and NBC News, Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were taken during a U.S. military operation that had been planned for months and executed early Saturday morning after explosions were reported across Caracas. Now, Trump says that Maduro was captured at what he described as a fortress-like residence. He says U.S. forces were prepared to cut through steel doors using blowtorches, but Maduro failed to reach a steel safe room in time. Trump says no U.S. forces were killed, there were only a few injuries, and that he personally watched the operation live. Now, BBC Verify reports that explosions were heard around 2 a.m. local time, with plumes of smoke rising over the Venezuelan capital. They say videos circulating online haven't been verified, but they have confirmed 3 strike locations so far: La Carlota Air Base, Port La Guarara, and Higuerote Airport. Fuerte Tijuana, one of Venezuela's largest military bases, was also reported as hit. NBC News adds significant detail about how this unfolded. They described the operation, called Operation Absolute Resolve, as the result of months of intelligence work, including a CIA team quietly operating inside Venezuela to track Maduro's movements, habits, and locations. NBC reports that U.S. troops trained using a replica of Maduro's compound, that an armada of ships was positioned offshore, and that at least 150 aircraft from 20 different bases were involved in this operation. They describe helicopters flying low over water, electricity in Caracas likely being cut, and aircraft disabling air defenses to clear a path for the extraction team. NBC says U.S. forces reached the compound around 1 a.m. Eastern Time, that Maduro and his wife were taken completely by surprise, and that a firefight broke out after they were captured. A U.S. helicopter was hit. Several American troops were injured but stable. By 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time, U.S. forces were out of the country completely. Trump says Maduro and Flores were taken to the U.S. Iwo Jima and then flown to New York. NBC reports Maduro arrived later that day and is expected to make his first court appearance. Now, the legal justification is critical here. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi says Maduro and Flores were already indicted in the Southern District of New York on charges including conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism, importing cocaine, and weapons offenses involving machine guns and destructive devices. The administration's framing here is clear. This wasn't a regime change, it was law enforcement. Now, Venezuela's government sees it very differently. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez says the government does not know where Maduro and his wife are and is demanding immediate proof of life. Venezuela has deployed its armed forces, declared a national emergency, and accused the United States of extremely serious military aggression. Now, the defense minister claims strikes hit civilian areas and says information is being gathered on potential casualties. The government accuses the United States of attempting to seize Venezuela's strategic resources, particularly oil and minerals, and trying to break the country's political independence. That reaction matters, but what matters more is how the rest of the world is responding to this. Because this story stopped being just about Venezuela almost immediately. Russia accused the United States of committing an act of armed aggression. China said it was deeply shocked and strongly condemned the use of force against a sovereign country. Iran called the strikes a flagrant violation of national sovereignty. Brazil's president said the operation crossed an unacceptable line and warned it could lead to violence, chaos, and instability. Chile expressed concern and called for a peaceful solution. Cuba described it as a criminal attack. At the United Nations, the Secretary General said he was deeply alarmed, warning that the operation sets a dangerous precedent and raises serious concerns about respect for international law. Now, the European Union reiterated its position that Maduro lacks legitimacy and that Venezuela needs a peaceful transition of power, but stressed that international law still matters. Now, Italy's government said the external military action is not the way to end totalitarian regimes, while still leaving room for defensive intervention against hybrid threats. And the United Kingdom's prime minister said he wanted to establish the facts and speak directly with Trump before commenting further, describing the situation as fast-moving. Or in other words, even countries that don't like Maduro are struggling with how this was done. And that brings us to what this really signals. Trump has made it clear this wasn't a one-off. He has said the United States will be heavily involved in Venezuela going forward, and that the U.S. will run the country until a proper transition can take place. NBC reports that Trump described this as a revised version of the Monroe Doctrine, calling it the Dunroe Doctrine, and made clear the U.S. is not leaving Venezuela anytime soon. So even if you believe Maduro is corrupt, even if you believe the charges are legitimate, even if you believe Venezuela really needs a change, the operation wasn't just about Maduro. It was about showing how far power can be pushed and justified when a country believes the stakes are high enough. Once a sitting president can be captured this way and defended afterward, the question stops being should this happen and becomes instead, who's next? That's why this story hasn't cooled off, and that's why allies everywhere are nervous. And that's why the word you keep hearing isn't victory, it's precedent. This wasn't just an arrest, it was a demonstration. And once demonstrations like this become acceptable, they don't get undone. They become the new baseline. I'm Hank, here to explain the chaos so you don't have to. If you want more content like this, you know what to do.